Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I'm your host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is your Midday Market Report for Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022, a holiday week as we get closer to Thanksgiving, a holiday to be grateful, family, friends, football on Thursday, 3 NFL games, and of course the Egg Bowl, where last night it sounded like Mr. Kiffin had left the building, but talking to people today, maybe that was just a ploy for more money and an extension of his contract. For me, it was a lateral move. I don't know why you're moving from Ole Miss to Auburn. There's no Bo Jackson, no Cam Newton, but we can talk about that later. It's our weekly trip out west to LA with a good friend, Ron, as we're going to talk some college football, some NFL. We're going to get you closer to Thursday and the weekend as we get closer to the potential Final Four conference championships. There's two lines already up for LSU, Georgia, 14.5, 15, big number there. But if LSU wins, they're in, and then Clemson, North Carolina. But Ron's here to give us all the scoop before the turkey. So without further ado, let's bring him in, the one and only Mr. Ron.
Morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Wonderful. Thanksgiving weekend. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. It's talk turkey. There's nothing like eating and football all at the same time.
You know, it's funny. Back in, I'm telling my age a little here. We always had Thanksgiving at my grandmother's, about an hour away in West Bridgewater. 25, 30 of my aunts, uncles, grandchildren would get together in one room. Then it became two rooms. And if you were lucky to get to the small room, that had the TV there. So dinner was always at 1:00 and the TV happened to be left on. So I was fortunate enough to see a lot of those kickoffs with Barry Sanders, Scott Mitchell, Herman Moore in the good old days, Ron.
Yeah, that was fun. We have a little tray tables around there. We've got a bunch of people coming over, and there'll be football. There'll be all sorts of stuff.
So as we talked behind the stage, and my brain is out to here, short week, everyone's scrambling. Are you traveling? You're not traveling. We're blessed to have you on. And as everyone that knows me, and if you don't know now, you know, we have almost 600 shows on YouTube right now. Not one has ever been scripted. And I'm talking to you on where to go today. There are so many ways to go. And you brought up a great topic to start. And this is probably in your Bible, when a team that has to win doesn't mean they're going to win. And you see so many people run into the window. Well, this team has to win to get in. And they run to the window to place the wager. You never see them walking back, cashing the wager. Tell us where some of those teams are right now, Ron.
It happens both in the NFL and in college. Teams that need to get into the playoffs. In the NFL, their lines get inflated because everybody knows they need to get in, and they say, oh, they'll have extra effort against the other team. But typically, those are divisional games, and you always want to beat your divisional rival. And the same is true in college. On the years when maybe UCLA wasn't as good as USC or Cal wasn't as good as Stanford or vice versa, it really didn't matter. If one team was shooting for high aspirations, a Final Four, the Rose Bowl, whatever it may be, the other team would invariably either get close, beat the point spread, or just beat them outright. We saw some look-ahead games last week. Certainly South Carolina putting on an offensive masterpiece against Tennessee was not quite expected to be in, what did they score, 60-something points. It was
63.
It was crazy. And Michigan got a scare. TCU got a scare against a good team, obviously, against Baylor. USC, UCLA went down to the wire. But this week, I was focusing on 5 and 6 teams that have already lost 6 games. But in the wonderful world of the bowls, 6 and 6 gets rewarded with a 13th game. Well, if they've already lost 6 games, they're really not that great anyway. And so I kind of look at those 5 and 6 teams, look at the stat sheet, look at the matchups, and see if I could go against those 5 and 6 teams with the other teams.
So you talked about the top 6. 5 of them don't cover, and obviously Tennessee gets knocked out of the dance. They were like minus 240 to get to the Final Four, just had to win out and let everyone else lose, and they were going to slip in there. Obviously, they have now out, and Hooker with a torn ACL, and God willing, he gets healthy and ready for the NFL draft, and it's rivalry week. So put all that together. And how do you form that? I know it's Tuesday. I know we don't have any releases here, but looking at the schedule, what are you seeing in the rivalry games, the must-win games? Anything jump out at you early on Tuesday?
Well, it's interesting because you have a game, for example, Nebraska and Iowa, which is Friday. I think I'll focus more on the Friday games because I myself haven't done as much work on Saturday at all yet. I've got some catch up to do. And as I'm going to be saying a lot today and on other shows, I don't cut corners. If it takes me longer, it takes me longer. But I don't, if it takes me an hour to do something, I'm not going to try to do it in a half an hour because that's just the way I am. And I think that's the way we have to do it. So focusing on Friday's games, Nebraska plays Iowa. Iowa, I believe it's win and they get to go to the Big 10 title game where they can score 3 points or whatever against Ohio State or Michigan. But that's a different story. So obviously their season's turned around. Their defense has been tremendous all year. And then you have Nebraska and you think, okay, based on my power ratings, this number should be higher. Why is it just sitting at, I'm not sure what it's sitting at right now, but
10.
When I last looked, 10 and a half. Based on numbers alone, it should be higher. Based on my numbers, I should say alone, it should be in the 14 range. So I'm saying, do they know something I don't? Why is that number low? I look at the data, the running data, it favors Nebraska even at the low number. Nebraska has nothing to play for. They have an interim staff. They're all going to be sending out their resumes next week. It's just a suspicious line to me. And Iowa hasn't played well enough, I think, when you look at it, that they could just win by double digits, even though they did last week in their game against Minnesota, playing without their quarterback, I believe. Wasn't that a double digit? No, that was a 3-point game, actually. That was 13-10. So Iowa doesn't, the series history has been close in this, always slanted to Iowa, but we're talking about close results. I think the odds makers have laid a trick or treat on us here by saying that, yes, Iowa should be more heavily favored, but their offense doesn't warrant it. I'm kind of looking at Nebraska and looking at an Iowa team that even if they get to the Big Ten title game, do you really think they're that good of a team?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, this team, they got me twice on team totals, and I've stayed far, far and away. And I actually leaned Minnesota last week. I thought that was not a get right spot, but I thought all the stars aligned. And again, Iowa just muscles its way, finds a way to win. And as you said, I'm a Nebraska fan from the 80s, Dr. Tom Frazier, Irvin Fryer, and those glory days. And I'm looking at that they're baiting us to take Iowa, and I could see an Iowa win by 7 here or something.
Yeah. A lot of the Friday games are interesting because it's two motivated teams. I think Florida and Florida State will both be motivated. Tulane and Cincy are playing for the right to host the American title game. So we know both sides are going to be motivated in that game. I don't know where you get the motivation from Wyoming and Fresno. They're both in bowls, but Fresno has a game next week that's more important than this one. and Wyoming's off a really bitter loss. So, a game they thought they had against Boise. So their spirits are a little bit down. So you have both teams without motivation. You can go up and down the ladder. Arkansas, Missouri, that's an interesting game. Arkansas technically has not much to play for because they're 6-5. Missouri is 5-6. They're playing for the right to get into a bowl game, but are they good enough to get into a bowl game?
So that game right there, after Arkansas's showing last week, they got the bowl game. We were expecting Arkansas to play like that all year. They finally had their time to shine. Again, Nebraska, Vegas puts them as a 4 and immediately goes to 3. With that assumption, winning, you're in on Missouri, correct?
Yeah. Basically, they're saying Missouri, their season is on the line. They either stay home or they get to go. And Missouri's playing toe-to-toe with Arkansas. It may not be the best example because I wouldn't be shocked with Missouri win, but they haven't earned the right via the power ratings to be anything under a field goal. So the extra motivation, I don't know how you work that into the spread in that particular game. I'm trying to think of other 5-6 examples, and I think, let me give you one that's kind of crazy. Miami of Florida and Pitt. Miami's 5-6, but I don't know that they have the only motivation to get to 6-6 for a Miami of Florida team that's terribly disappointed this year is that they get extra bowl practices. It's almost unfair that teams that do not get to go to a bowl do not get the extra 10. I think it's like as many as 15 bowl practices, depending on when their bowl is. And so that's a nice perk for some of the teams that end up in a bowl game, even if they're 6-6. But I'm not sure Miami's thinking about that right now. Miami's just thinking, what a wasted season.
And we have a good friend of ours, Rob, that comes on from Beating the Bookie and Miami alum, and he's very, very disappointed. I mean, they brought in the dream staff. I mean, they brought the Oregon coach in, and they got all the beautiful assistants all lined up, cherry picked from all over. And it takes some time. It usually takes 2 to 3 years. Now with the transfer portal, you can change it up a lot quicker. Staying with Miami, can you expect, let's just say that they lose, so they go 5-7 this year. Can you expect at least a 7-5 or even an 8-4 bounce back that quick in year 2?
Miami, even before the current coach, has been active in the transfer portal from the very beginning. So every year it looks like they've assembled a team that's much better than the year before, and yet they disappoint on the field. Some of that is chemistry. Sometimes we overemphasize the games in the transfer portal because we get all these names, but can they mesh together? If you have 4 new secondary players, that doesn't work as well as if you have 4 good transfer portal guys, 1 in each area of the defense. So if you have, somebody on the defensive line that's an instant starter, somebody on a linebacker that's an instant starter. I don't like seeing teams that have 4 new players, for instance, at the secondary, because that chemistry, that teamwork takes a little bit longer to get into. Bounce back. Yeah, I think Miami has an 8-4 team right now, but something went wrong in the coaching.
You brought up Florida State. Hats off to Florida State, an amazing year, playing great ball. This Florida team has not been playing great ball. Yet a number of only 9 right now, 9.5 in a lot of shops, with a 57. Shootout at the OK Corral. Does Florida have enough ammo to keep up with this, or is this almost like a letdown spot for Florida State in this rivalry game?
Won't be a letdown for Florida State because they've had consecutive losses to Florida and they want to own the state of Florida. This is for recruiting battles. Florida's got an incredible offense running the ball, and Florida State has really not disappointed. They're finally living up to their potential. This is one of those games that you could throw out the record. It's almost like an Army-Navy. I think both sides are going to be heavily motivated. According again to my power numbers, Florida State should be much higher, but you can't possibly make that game double digits because of the rivalry, because of Florida State being in an unfamiliar role, being over a touchdown favorite. It hasn't been since the Bobby Bowden days that's happened. So I understand the line completely. Florida State would be thrilled to win by 3. They'd be thrilled to win by 33, whatever it takes. They're going to have to stop Florida's run. Yeah, I think it's a fascinating game. And I understand. And this is what you get in rivalry games. You do not get true market value on lines. If you wanted Florida, you should get more points, but you're not because of the intense rivalry and the bragging rights for 365 more days.
I'm going to stay in Friday for 2 seconds here. Cincinnati's had a great run the last couple of years. I know they're at home. Initially 3, now 2, 2.5, mostly 2, and it looks like in some shops going to go to 1.5. Are they strictly favored because they are at home?
The answer would be yes there. Cincinnati has won some games because they know how to win. I always talk about the old Dick Vermeil Philadelphia Eagle days. So you and I can relate to that. Everybody else is going to say, who's Dick Vermeil? But it's still true now. It's true with Jacksonville now. Let's use a modern day example. Jacksonville's becoming a good team, but you have to learn how to win. And Jacksonville's not there. Just like the old Philadelphia Eagle team didn't know how to win and took Vermeil a few years to get them to learn how to win. Cincinnati is past that point. They know how to win. And so they have not played their best 2 or 3 times this year and still won. The old Cincinnati teams wouldn't do that. Tulane's a better team on the field than Cincinnati, in my opinion. If you look at comparable scores, sometimes I do that, where I look at how did Cincinnati play against their American rivals? How did Tulane play? It's almost across the board. Tulane played equal or better versus the same opponent than Cincinnati did. It's just, can Tulane get over the hump? Personally, I think Tulane's a slightly better team. I'm emotionally rooting for Tulane because I have a ticket under 9.5 wins for Cincinnati. And, I've been teased a lot this year where they almost lose, but they don't quite. Let's see if Tulane gets over the hump. But you're right. Tulane is on reputation, or Cincinnati is on reputation as the favorite in this game. Now Tulane has to prove that they can play with the big boys.
Let me piggyback right there, Ron, for people that are watching and listening or are going to go to YouTube and watch this after. You're sitting there with the Cincinnati under. And do you go in at any point and then look at this and take a hedge factor, or do you trust the process and let it ride?
That's the $64 million question, right, Jeff? I mean, each case is situational specific and it gets in your head. I do not even look at those season win totals until we're 2 weeks away. So last week I had to look. Texas Tech in particular, I had to look, to give that example. I have an under 6 ticket. They were sitting at 5. So theoretically I had some wiggle room, but I like them against Iowa State anyway. Iowa State should never be laying a field goal over anybody with their close game history, their lack of offense, and so on. So I felt Texas Tech was going to win. I'm sitting on, then if I think that they're going to win, I'm not going to win my season win total. The best I'm going to do is push. So I have to do extra on that. And so what I did is said, I like Texas Tech anyway. So I'm going to, I bet probably a third of the bet higher on Texas Tech last week. And if it lost, I said, okay, now I'm win or tie on the Texas Tech season win total. And if it wins, then I've really done a good job. Then it lowers the cushion in case they win again this week against Oklahoma. So for the Tulane-Cincinnati game, and I have 42 season win tickets, and I think 6 are still pending. Usually there's more, but there's about 6 right now, maybe a little bit more. So this is one of the ones pending. I think I'll probably slightly lower my action on Tulane if I do action on Tulane because I would get the benefit of the win. I'm worried about Tulane, not in terms of the fact that they match up against Cincinnati, but can they actually win? Will something get to them at the end of the game? Tulane's had a fantastic season. I think they're a little bit better than Cincinnati. So I'll probably just kind of make an average play at best on this and not try to overdo it.
Last game on Friday, Baylor left everything on the table, 16 extra seconds, unfortunately. We've been waiting for the shoe to fall with TCU. They're still in it. The dream is still there. Obviously, they win the Big 12 undefeated. They have to get to the Final Four in my eyes. Texas was 7.5, now 9. Most people thinking what I'm thinking. Tough for Baylor to get back up to where they were, put everything in against TCU. Is Texas a double-digit winner this weekend?
Yeah, it's tough because I think Baylor, I looked a little bit more careful at this game Friday, so I have delved into Friday, and Baylor's defense is just not where it was, which is understandable because a number of players went to the NFL last year. From Baylor, that's a major difference. They're so well coached. The fact that they're in some of these games and they're playing their hearts out, this was really a transition year for Baylor all the way through. Texas has the motivation because if they win, there's a possibility they could get to the Big 12 title game. I'm not a big Sarkisian fan when it comes to defense, so I think Baylor can hang with them. But unlike last week when I thought Baylor had enough ammunition via the running data to hang with TCU, Texas really, on paper, looks like they can win by double digits. It's not a game I'm going to be involved in. I'm curious to see whether Sark gets out coached in this game, but they did hang, what was it, something like 49-0 against Oklahoma, which kind of told you something about Oklahoma, as well as the fact that Texas is a well-oiled offensive machine most of the time. A double-digit win wouldn't surprise me. A well-coached Baylor cover wouldn't surprise me. So I'm just on the sidelines for this one.
The game that we could have talked about in June, July, August, September, October, November finally has come. Ohio State, Michigan. Some look-ahead lines had it as high as 12, 13 at some points. Surprisingly, 9 down to 7.5. The winner of this game is in the Big Ten title game, and they win there. Obviously, maybe against an Iowa team, they'll be double-digit favorites at least. Get you to the Final Four. The loser here still has outside possibility looking in. Style points will be big here. If I asked you today, Ron, are you buying or selling? Meaning, are you taking the 7.5? I'm not a khaki trouser Michigan team, but the more I think about this, I think they're going to keep this close. And call me crazy because I've been team Ohio State team total over, and their offense is fabulous. I think this game's going to be closer than people think, and I think Michigan has a chance.
Now, I think lesser Michigan teams 2 or 3 years ago played tooth and nail to Ohio State. Wasn't like 35-34, 36-30. It was just a real close game. Michigan definitely has a chance. I don't know because it's Saturday. I haven't done all my work whether or not Michigan's running back is at 100%. And that's huge because if the lack of a threat of a run game against this Ohio State team who's playing much better defense with, I think it's Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator they got from Oklahoma State, night and day different. I think that would cause a problem for Michigan. Ohio State has the revenge motive as well. Without their star running back, I think this is a major concern for Michigan. Other than that, anything is possible in this series.
And we will talk about this next Tuesday if we're able to meet. A look-ahead number I thought I saw was like 15, Georgia and LSU. Does that seem a little high?
Going to have to go to my numbers and look at LSU's number. Off the top of my head, it's about on par. Georgia's power rating for me has not changed all season long. It's been ultra consistent. And LSU's, of course, rose from the beginning once they started getting, they upset Alabama, and they've done a lot of nice things. They squeaked by against Arkansas when Arkansas was without its quarterback. But yeah, I think we're in the range of 14, 15. I would agree. Georgia just reloaded on defense, and it's amazing.
100%. And Clemson 7.5 against North Carolina with a 62 right now for the ACC championship.
Yeah, North Carolina's playing better defense as well. Looking at their number, 7.5 sounds a little low to me right now, based on where I have North Carolina's power rating. They're too up and down to me, North Carolina, even though Clemson hasn't been winning by margin. Clemson's a better team. They seem to be hitting their stride. What's most important for Clemson is their all NFL front four, certain to be drafted very, very high next year. They weren't healthy in the middle of the season. If they get them healthy for the title game, that would be very good for them. If they win out, they still have a shot at getting into the Final Four, like it or not.
NFL not for long. Changing of the guard. As we speak, Carolina has announced Sam Darnold will be the starter this week for the Panthers.
Didn't know that.
That is breaking news as we speak. I don't think it's too far-fetched today that we say there could be a repeat Super Bowl of the 49ers and Kansas City. I talk about the hunted versus the hunter. Kansas City, that's all we talked about when the season started. The Bills, Josh Allen going through Buffalo. They've had a few hiccups. They struggled in Detroit against the Browns on Sunday. I heard they were heading back to Buffalo to come back on Thursday to face the Lions. Makes zero sense to me. The Chiefs and Mahomes. Mahomes now, I think, is the leader for the MVP as we speak. So we're at week 11 or 12 here as we speak. Give me your thoughts on the makeup of the NFL right now.
Well, it's a logjam now at the top because as San Francisco gets healthier, they're clearly the class of the NFC, with apologies to Dallas. I would take San Francisco slightly over Dallas, and I would have Dallas and Philadelphia in a flat-footed tie there. If coaching matters, then Dallas might find a way to be third in the group out of the three. Minnesota was exposed. I didn't expect a beatdown like that at home. They were exposed last week, but Minnesota's having a fine season too. I don't think anybody can play their worst game and get away with a win under those conditions. But certainly San Francisco, pick your poison. Do they go to Deebo Samuel? He could catch the ball. He could run on the end around. Then you got McCaffrey, who's a natural 3-tool running back. And then people sleep on Mitchell, I always look for yards per carry when a running back enters the NFL, like an Aaron Jones of Green Bay, who is not their first choice at running back. They had a running back that they drafted higher that year. But Aaron Jones, 4 years in, I don't know what conference he was in then, because their team has been in 3 different conferences, but it could have been the American, it could have been Conference USA. But every year, I think it was UTEP, University of Texas of El Paso, every year 5 yards or more per carry. That guy was destined to have a good career in the NFL. And Jeff Mitchell is the same way. Jeff Mitchell, every time you give him the ball, he's running 5 yards a carry. So you got 3 guys that Jimmy G could either hand off or throw to. And you don't have the Trey Lance experiment where you have to groom him and give him half the playbook. As soon as Jimmy G became the starter, you knew exactly what you had in Jimmy G. And you just had to get this team healthy. Their left tackle, their defensive back, make sure Bosa's healthy. San Francisco might be the best team in the NFL if we don't watch out.
I was watching one of the plays, and I said this last week, and I'm going to reiterate this. It was watching San Fran 1st and goal from the 7 against the Chargers, and it was like Shanahan was a kid in a candy store. He didn't know who to put out and where to put them. And then last night, he's got Elijah Mitchell lined up as the back. He's got Ayuk on one side, Debo on the other. He's got CMC in the slot. Oh, and by the way, George Kittle is also lined up at tight end. I mean, these weapons, and he's going to have 4 or 5 more weeks to get healthier and just to figure this offense out.
Yeah, I apologize completely for forgetting about George Kittle. I mean, he's the top 2 NFL tight ends. So it's an embarrassment of riches right now, carefully built. And not only does coaching matter, but drafting matters. And what Philadelphia has done with and what Baltimore's done, plucking free agents, Philadelphia signing Ndamukong Suh and Joseph they were exposed against Washington in the run defense, and Ndamukong Suh was amazing for Tampa. Tampa's run defense has fallen off the map without him. So these teams that understand how to plug holes work within the salary cap, and San Francisco is one of them. It's a complete team effort that gets this done. You wonder why some teams fail year after year. It's because one or more phases of their organization is letting them down.
Motivation. Teams that have mailed it in, and there's a handful in my eyes. We watched Arizona last night. Obviously, no Kyler Murray. A coach that got an extension before the season started that I don't think will be back next year, but I don't have that answer. Injuries, another big part of it, but there's a list of teams. We talked about the Raiders last week where they put Renfro on the IR. They put Waller on the IR. Martinez retires. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. Some of these teams that are lining themselves up for the draft, when you're sitting down on Sunday figuring out who you're going to wager or invest in, where does the motivation factor come in to you, your lines, and your power rankings?
I do mechanical power ratings, so I do not adjust for motivation, but I won't make a play. I'll be hesitant to make a play based on Arizona's tackling last night. I mean, my wife was with me watching that touchdown where the guy, went down the sidelines, and people were trying to get out of the way. It was like, oh, it's you have the right of way. We don't have the right of way. That's a sign that the organization needs an overhaul. So I'm not going to be running to the window to play Arizona, but it's sometimes a little dangerous, at least in my thinking, to go week 11, week 12 and play the motivational factor. I do see lockers cleaned out in the last home game, week 17, week 18, and that's where motivation comes really into play. I don't want to necessarily make motivation a factor with Arizona, but I'm not going to run to the window if my power ratings really got to be off, or metrically, they really have to have some sort of advantage for me to want to play Arizona. And right now, there's not a lot of trust in that organization. There's not a lot of trust in the Denver organization, a team that should never have had that game go to overtime. They go to overtime and they lose. Denver's just one dumpster fire after another. So everybody thought Jeff Saturday, the hiring at Indy, that's the end of Indy. They're not going to do anything. And then last minute announcement that Matt Ryan is back as the starter. So sometimes you can jump the gun on motivation, and it worked out for Indy. So I'm really, I see it, I hear it, but I try not to pay too much attention to it right now.
I always talk about, especially in the NFL, people remember what they saw last. And I think it's a perfect example leading into the 3 games on Thursday, where here's a Lions team that's won miraculously 2 road games in a row. No one's talking about them. Hosting the Bills, who haven't covered in forever. In comes Dallas and a rivalry game against the Giants. That line was 7.5 overnight. It is now moved to 9, which obviously is a little inflated. And then we have the Patriots and the Vikings, where the Vikings got shellacked at home. The Patriots quietly have won 5 out of their last 6. In comes Bill in a short week. Before you're sitting down to carve up the turkey, is there anything that you can tell these people when you're trying to dissect a short week on Thanksgiving with those 3 games?
Well, Jeff, that's beautifully said, because it's amazing. I hadn't thought about it, but all 3 games bring different expectations based on last week's results. I'm a little concerned. I don't understand, like you, why Buffalo would fly back when they're already there. It seemed like they could have acclimated there just the way that other teams, San Francisco is notorious for doing it, where they request to the NFL back-to-back road trips so that they can stay out. They were in Denver getting used to altitude last week before they went to Mexico City. So I don't know why Buffalo wants to hop on a plane on Saturday, then hop on a plane on Monday, and then hop on a plane again on Wednesday. It takes away their advantage. I look for a shootout in this game, less preparation time. You're not going to be able to scout the opponent as much. Buffalo had all kinds of other worries. If anything, my advice would be kind of look at the overs in that particular game, just because, what kind of game planning have you had? Where are your legs if you're Buffalo? What about Detroit, who basically probably wouldn't have an answer for Josh Allen anyway because their defense is understaffed. Dallas has had their way in past history hosting the New York Giants. So if we look at that game, people were thinking, okay, Dallas is going to have their way again. They've had it in the past. The Giants got exposed. They were winning, and possibly they weren't winning based on ability in all those weeks. They were maybe stealing money in a way because they were finding ways to win. Their opponent let down and so on. Now they've come back down to earth. But have they really come back down to earth? I mean, they have a great pass defense. I think they could limit Dak Prescott on the passing. So it's really for them to limit the back Pollard, limit him because he makes some splash plays. And then offensively, what are you going to get out of Daniel Jones and the offensive line? That's a big worry in that game because Dallas is the number one with a bullet in defensive sacks. And we all know that the New York Giant offensive line isn't perfect. And unfortunately, Daniel Jones' internal clock from Duke on to the NFL is less than perfect. And this is an audition for Daniel Jones. I heard this talked about today. They still have to know whether or not they're going to pick up this option, or whether maybe they didn't pick up this option. They have to know whether or not they want to move on with another quarterback. I think this is the most important game for Daniel Jones of the season, how he does against Dallas. And then the night game, I think you get extra value maybe on Minnie, just because Minnie looked so bad last week, but New England's had offensive struggles. I haven't handicapped the game completely, so I don't have any words of wisdom. But I would, on the surface, expect a close game.
Yeah, outside looking in, just from my eyes and what I'm hearing already, the general public, or I like to say the D-gens, I can see them all in on Buffalo, all in on Dallas, and the Patriots become that public trendy dog. It's Bill. It's a short week here. They've won 5 out of 6, and they're ready to expose what Dallas just exposed to Minnesota. Bill finds a way to take out your best offensive guy, whether that's going to be Dalvin Cook, whether that's going to be Justin Jefferson. And we all know what we like to, you'll hear it for the next 3 days, and that's Kirk Cousins on a primetime game.
Yeah, a little bit unfair because he's had a weakened offensive line for a lot of those years, and their secondary is not very good. We'll see if it gets exposed this week because New England hasn't been testing the secondary. They prefer to be run-centric, shortened games. They've even punted on short yardage or gone for field goal on short yardage. It's not your big, bold New England team of yesteryear. So it'll be interesting to see whether they can expose Minnie's weaknesses.
It's Thanksgiving, and we talked before we started this show, and you brought it. I mean, this is just perfect on a Thanksgiving week. Too much on your plate. Yeah. If you can further up on that one.
Well, these short weeks and you're getting ready for everything. And I do a lot of manual work because I have formulas that I use in college football where I'm recording rushing data, but I record out kneel downs and sacks and bad snaps on punts because I want accurate running data when I'm analyzing these 131 teams. And I've got team sheets there's 131 college teams. I've got 99 team sheets or something like that. The question is, do I cut corners and go faster so that I can get through everything for a week like this, Thanksgiving, when games are on Thursday and Friday and so on? Or do I sit back and take extra time and just not rush myself? And my advice to other people, if you're new at this, don't try to do all the games. Do some of the games. Don't do all of the games. Do the ones you're most comfortable with. Do the conference that you're most comfortable with. I myself, as I'm getting older, have already made the decision to downsize next year. I'm going from 99 sheets down to 81, for example. You're the first to hear it live. It's breaking news. It's not that I'm still going to have power ratings on all these teams, but I'm not going to be recording stats for each individual game and player and stuff like that. I just can't do it anymore and do it right. If I'm going to do it right, I'm going to do it the same way I'm always when doing it, not cutting corners. And so in this week, if you want to, narrow your focus and say there's a full slate of games everybody's playing except for Charlotte. I think their season is over, so you have 130, you still have the same 50-60 college games. If you don't have the time, pick 10, pick 5 and do it and play a couple. My advice is don't cut corners. Just go and do the same routine that you've been doing. If you have a routine, if you don't have a routine, disregard everything and start getting a routine for next year and stick by it, and just limit your exposure. That's all.
Ron, I'll close with this because you go to Vegas, I go to Vegas, and or people that are accustomed to going to horse tracks or dog tracks, when you're waiting in line at the window and you just hear the same number called and called, or you're waiting in line at say South Point, and then you just hearing everyone call the same game and same game and same game, and then you get the guys at the very end that are running to the window to call in that last play, and they're give me the 7 with the 2-3-4 with the 2-3-4 with the 7, and they're going like this, blah blah blah, or they're just trying to get in Dallas before kickoff. We never see those guys walking back to cash that ticket. And I just wish people would be more obvious. And if you keep hearing the same thing, it's the same thing on gambling Twitter. When the whole world is on one side, as hard as it is to go against them, you're better off either A, not to play it, or B, have a little gumption to go against them, because usually when the whole world's on one side, it doesn't end well.
Yeah. It's really about the process. And if you've developed a process, if you've done this for a number of years, if you trust your power ratings, if you trust your metrics, if you trust the situations, and I combine all three, no one area, it's not just about power ratings. It's not just about situations. It needs to be tied together. I'd rather not have a play on something than force a play. And you never want to force a play. And if you're ever in that feeling where you're ever in that thinking that you're feeling rushed, take a step back. There's always next week. Unfortunately, we're running out of next weeks in the NFL. But that doesn't mean that it used to be, now every game's on TV, but it used to be just because the game's on TV doesn't mean you have to play it. There's value in playing Charlotte against somebody or whatever, as opposed to Ohio State, Michigan. Everybody wants action in the big game and stuff like that. But if there's not something that fits your metrics, enjoy the game, watch the game. I'm typically watching games that I don't necessarily have a play on, because that game as a viewer, as a fan, is more exciting than the game that I might have a play on. Everybody's different, but that's the way I do it.
No, you're preaching. You're saying words of wisdom. I talk since day one about trusting the process, and in our lanes, there's going to be great runs, and then there's going to be some speed bumps. And our job is to try to keep you off that roller coaster. And it's about trusting the process, not forcing the action. And I'm sorry if we don't have a play on that game, we just move on. But it's hard for a lot of people to understand that process.
Yeah, that's why I do so much in July and August. We talked about this at the beginning of the year. Chris and I talked about this a million times, and we'll go back to it when we talk a little bit today, is that the work that's done in July and August makes it so that you're not rushing in October, November, December. I've already handicapped this week's game, so I'm just going to go back to it and see whether or not my numbers matched up. I have values on what I expected: yards per carry, running, pass defense. Is the team meeting it, or are they not meeting it? How many sacks does a team have? I didn't expect the Raiders to have just 10, 11, 12 sacks. All along, I'm looking at that information that I did in July and August to prepare for this. It's too late to prepare now. If you're getting over there and you want to chase your money, or if you want to expand the number of plays, you need to think this out in July and August. That's my advice.
Ron, the crawl has been going. Everyone can follow you, obviously, on Twitter at Ron A Sports. We can't thank you enough for our Tuesday shows, especially on a short week and a holiday week. We wish you and your family the best of Thanksgiving, and we want you to enjoy the weekend.
Same to you, Jeff, and same to everybody who's watching or listening out there. Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy. Don't eat too much. There's always leftovers, over the weekend. We love those leftovers, and can't wait to talk about the title games next week. So be back next week.
Thank you again, Ron. Tell Chris and the crew we said hello. We gave you exactly 12 minutes. We gave you an extra couple minutes to get ready for your show.
Thanks.
Thank you. The one and only Ron at A Sports. We can't thank him enough. I have to thank Mr. Lucky for putting us together. You don't find a lot of people that talk the process and do the work that Ron does like we do back here at East Coast Sports. January 1st will be the start of our 8th full year in these lanes. And as Massachusetts gets ready to launch, we've already set up the groundwork for the patrons in Massachusetts that want to come down our lanes. And to be able to talk with Ron on a weekly basis, who talks about doing the homework in June and July to get ready. As he said, he's already handicapped these games 4 or 5 months ago. Now it's to come back to look at the metrics, to look at the numbers, to get himself set up. So we can't thank Ron enough. And all the viewers, watchers, and listeners, thank you. Just hit the like, retweet, reach out to Ron at A Sports if you're not following him. He's a great, great guy. He'll follow you back. He'll answer any questions that you might have leading up to this weekend's games and future down the line. Coming up next in about 10-15 minutes will be the closing bell with my co-host Riley at R Mags on Twitter. We're going to get yourself caught up with what's going on tonight. There's a full slate of college hoop. We have a couple MAC games. We have an NBA slate. We have 2 hockey games. For the ECSI VIPs, we take one in the you-know-what. We had Akron +5, up 2 at halftime. They were up 33-25 right before the close of the first half. Then they had a 35-33 lead at half. As I talked so much, that first 5 minutes where you set the tone for the second half, LSU came out guns a-blaze and said not so fast, and then they closed the game in the last 5 minutes and just stomped on the throat. We'll be talking with Riley to get us ready for tonight's game. Then the alert will come out later tonight, getting us ready for the nightcap. So stay tuned. We will be back probably in about 10 minutes. See you soon.